You know what gets me every single year? You walk out to your garden on a beautiful July morning, coffee in hand, feeling good about life, and then you see it. Your tomato leaves are chewed to lace. There's a line of aphids crawling up your pepper stems like they own the place. And that squash plant you babied from seed? Something got to it overnight. So what do? Same thing I did for 20-something years. You grab a bottle of something off the shelf, spray everything down, and hope for the best. Maybe it works for a week, maybe two, but the pests come back. They always come back, and every season it feels like you're fighting the same war with the same weapons. And somehow, you're still losing ground. But here's what caught my attention a few years back. I was visiting Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and I got to spend some time around Amish gardens. These folks have been growing food for over 300 years without a single bottle of synthetic pesticide. Not one. And their plants looked better than mine. Healthier, fuller, less damage. I'm standing there looking at rows of tomatoes with barely a nibble on them, and I'm thinking, what do they know that I missed for 3 decades? Today I'm going to walk you through exactly what they do and how you can start using it in your own backyard. And stick around to the end, because I'll share a simple Amish technique for protecting young transplants that I've never seen in any gardening book. I'll be honest with you, when I first started learning about how Amish families handle pests, part of me was skeptical. I've been gardening since I was in my late 20s. I've read the books, I've tried the organic sprays, the neem oil, the diatomaceous earth, and I figured if there was a better way, I would have found it by now. But what I realized spending time around Lancaster County is that I'd been thinking about pest control completely backward. I was always reacting to problems after they showed up. The Amish don't do that. They design their gardens so that most pest problems never develop in the first place. That shift in thinking changed everything for me, and it didn't require buying a single product. In Amish communities, especially in the Lancaster County settlements of southeastern Pennsylvania, there's a guiding principle called Gelassenheit. Gelassenheit. It's a German word, and it's hard to translate perfectly into English. But the closest meaning is something like yielding to the natural order, surrendering control, trusting that God's design has a balance built into it, and your job isn't to override that balance, but to work within it. Now, I'm not here to preach theology, but here's why this matters for your garden. When you spray a pesticide, even an organic one, you're overriding the system. You're killing the pests, sure, but you're also killing the ladybugs, the lacewings, the parasitic wasps, the ground beetles, all the creatures that were already working to control those pests for free. The Amish figured out through generations of observation what modern soil science and entomology are now confirming. If you build a garden that supports the whole system, the system manages itself. You don't have to fight nature when you let nature do the fighting for you. That's Gelassenheit in the garden. And here's how it works, step by step. The first thing Amish gardeners understand is that pest control starts in the soil, not on the leaves. This is where most of us get it wrong, myself included for a long time. We see a bug eating our plants, and we treat the plant. But the Amish approach says if your soil is right, your plants will be strong enough to handle moderate pest pressure on their own. Here's the science behind it. Healthy soil that's rich in organic matter and microbial life produces plants with stronger cell walls and higher concentrations of natural defensive compounds. University research out of Penn State and Cornell has shown that plants grown in biologically active, compost-amended soil are measurably more resistant to both pest damage and disease. The plants are literally tougher. It's not folklore, it's chemistry. So here's what to do. Every spring, before you plant anything, spread 2 to 3 in of well-aged compost across your garden beds and work it into the top 4 to 6 in of soil. If you can get your hands on compost that includes aged manure, even better. The Amish use a lot of horse and cow manure composted over winter, and that combination of plant matter and animal waste creates an incredibly diverse soil microbiome. If you don't have access to aged manure, regular homemade compost or a good quality bagged compost works fine. The key here is consistency. Don't just do this once and expect miracles. The Amish build their soil every single year, season after season. After 2 or 3 years of annual compost additions, you'll notice something remarkable. Your plants will be visibly more vigorous and you'll see less pest damage overall. Nature doesn't work that way, but noticeably less. I started doing this about 4 years ago, and the difference in my tomato and pepper plants alone was worth the effort. They're thicker stemmed, darker green, and they bounce back from minor pest feeding much faster than they used to. One thing to keep in mind, if you're in zones 3 through 5 where your growing season is shorter, get your compost down as early as the ground is workable in spring. Ideally 3 to 4 weeks before your last frost date, so the soil biology has time to wake up before transplanting. In zones 7 through 9, you can add compost in late winter and get an even earlier start. This next step is where the Amish approach really starts to look different from a conventional garden, and honestly, it's the part that surprised me the most. Most American gardens are planted in neat single-crop rows. Tomatoes here, beans there, squash way over on that side. It looks tidy, and it makes harvesting easy. But to a pest, a long row of one crop is basically an all-you-can-eat buffet with a neon sign pointing the way. Amish gardeners mix things up on purpose. They interplant aromatic herbs and flowers directly among their vegetables, and the reason is beautifully simple. Most garden pests find their target plants by smell. Aphids, cabbage moths, tomato hornworms, cucumber beetles, they all navigate by following the chemical signals that their host plants release. When you surround those host plants with strong-smelling companions, you create what entomologists call olfactory confusion. The pests literally cannot find your tomatoes because the basil, the marigolds, and the dill are drowning out the signal. Here's exactly how to set this up. For every 3 to 4 tomato plants, tuck in one basil plant about 8 to 10 in from the base of each tomato. Basil repels aphids, whiteflies, and tomato hornworms. And as a bonus, many gardeners swear it improves tomato flavor. The Amish have been planting these two together for generations. Between your rows of cabbage, broccoli, or kale, plant dill or cilantro every 12 to 14 in. These herbs repel cabbage moths and imported cabbage worms, but here's the double benefit. When the dill and cilantro flower, they attract parasitic wasps and hoverflies, which are voracious predators of aphids and caterpillars. So you're repelling one set of pests while recruiting their natural enemies at the same time. That's the kind of efficiency the Amish have built into their gardens for generations. Around the borders of your beds, plant French marigolds, not the big African marigolds, but the smaller French varieties. Space them about 10 to 12 in apart. Marigold roots release a compound called alpha-terphenol into the soil that suppresses root knot nematodes, and their strong scent above ground deters whiteflies and squash bugs. This isn't just tradition. Research from multiple agricultural universities has confirmed the nematode-suppressing effect of French marigolds. Now, not every Amish community plants the exact same combinations. Families pass down their own preferred pairings, and what works in Lancaster County might get tweaked a bit in Holmes County, Ohio, or in the Indiana settlements. But the underlying principle is the same everywhere. Never plant a crop alone. Always give it companions that confuse pests and attract allies. If you're in a hotter climate, zones 8 or 9, swap cilantro for summer savory, since cilantro bolts fast in the heat, and add a few nasturtium plants along the edges as well. Nasturtiums serve double duty, and I'll get to that in a later step. This third step is one that I completely overlooked for most of my gardening life, and I think a lot of us do. We spend all this energy trying to kill the bad bugs, and we forget to invite the good ones. The Amish don't make that mistake. They've always understood that a healthy garden isn't one with no insects. It's one with the right insects. Here's what I mean. A single ladybug can eat up to 50 aphids in a single day. One lacewing larva can consume 200 aphids in its short lifetime. Parasitic wasps lay their eggs inside hornworms and cabbage worms, killing them from the inside. Ground beetles patrol the soil surface at night, eating slugs, cutworms, and grubs. These are your allies, and the Amish build their gardens to keep them around. The simplest way to encourage beneficial predators is to create what's called an insectary strip. This is a small section of your garden, even just a row 2 ft wide along one edge, planted with flowers and herbs that beneficial insects need for nectar and pollen. The best plants for this are sweet alyssum, yarrow, fennel, dill, and Queen Anne's lace. Plant these in a dense strip and let them flower all season. The key is continuous bloom. You need something flowering from early spring through fall, so the beneficials always have a food source. Here's the practical setup. Along one border of your garden, plant a row of sweet alyssum at the front since it stays low and blooms all season. Behind it, alternate yarrow and dill plants about 10 to 12 and apart. If you have room, add a few fennel plants at the back. This strip will buzz with hoverflies, parasitic wasps, lacewings, and ladybugs within a few weeks of the first blooms. Once those populations establish, they patrol your entire garden. The Amish also leave small areas of their property a little wild on purpose. A patch of clover near the garden, an unmowed strip along the fence, a pile of stones or old logs where ground beetles can shelter. These aren't signs of laziness. They're habitat. Every beneficial insect needs somewhere to live, breed, and overwinter. If your garden is perfectly manicured with bare soil between every row, you're essentially hanging a no-vacancy sign for the very creatures you want to attract. If you're gardening in zones 4 through 6, where beneficial insect populations can take longer to build up in spring, consider purchasing a release of ladybugs or lacewing eggs early in the season to jumpstart things. But make sure you have the flowering habitat in place first, or they'll simply fly away to find food elsewhere. That was a mistake I made my first year. I bought a bag of ladybugs, released them, and they were gone by the next morning. You need to give them a reason to stay. This next step is the one that feels the most old-fashioned, and honestly, that's exactly why it works. Every Amish gardener I've spoken with in Lancaster County talks about the morning walk like it's just part of the day. The same as breakfast or feeding the animals. It's not dramatic, it's not complicated, but it might be the single most effective pest control habit you can build. You're not just admiring your tomatoes. You're looking, turning over leaves, checking the undersides of squash foliage, running your eyes along every stem, and when you find a pest, you pick it off by hand and drop it into a bucket of soapy water. I know it sounds almost too simple, but here's why it matters so much. Most serious pest damage doesn't happen because of 1 or 2 bugs. It happens because a small population was allowed to explode unchecked. A single tomato hornworm can strip an entire branch in 48 hours. A pair of squash bugs can lay hundreds of eggs in a week. By the time you notice the damage and run for a spray bottle, you're already behind. The Amish morning walk catches problems when they're still small. 2 hornworms on Monday becomes 0 hornworms on Monday instead of 20 hornworms by Friday. Here's how to do it effectively. Give yourself 15 to 20 minutes each morning. Bring a small bucket filled halfway with water and a squirt of dish soap. Start at one end of your garden and work your way through every row. For tomatoes, look for hornworms on the top leaves and along the stems. They're big, but they camouflage well, so look for their dark droppings on the leaves below as a giveaway. For squash and cucumbers, flip the leaves and look for clusters of small bronze-colored eggs on the undersides. Those are squash bug eggs, and scraping them off with your thumbnail now saves you a real headache later. For brassicas like cabbage, broccoli, and kale, look for small green caterpillars and the white butterflies hovering around your plants laying eggs. The conventional approach is to wait until damage is visible and then treat the whole garden. The Amish approach is to prevent the damage daily with 10 to 15 minutes of attention. After doing this for a couple of seasons, I can tell you it becomes second nature. I actually enjoy it now. It's quiet time in the garden before the day gets going, and it keeps me connected to what's actually happening in my beds week by week. You catch problems early, you learn what's normal and what's not, and you develop an eye for the garden's rhythms that no amount of spraying will ever teach you. One honest note here, if you're gardening on a larger scale, say a quarter acre or more, the morning walk takes longer and you may not catch everything by hand. The Amish who farm larger plots often use lightweight floating row covers over their brassicas and young squash plants as a physical barrier against egg-laying moths and beetles. You can buy row cover fabric at most garden centers, and it lets light and water through while keeping pests out. Just make sure to remove it when squash and cucumber plants begin to flower, so pollinators can reach the blossoms. Now let's keep going. This 5th step is one of my favorites because it's clever in a way that makes you smile once you understand it. Instead of trying to keep pests away from your garden entirely, the Amish sometimes invite them in on purpose. but they send them to the wrong address. This is called trap cropping. The idea is simple. You plant something the pest likes even more than your main crop, and you plant it on the edges of your garden where it draws them away from the vegetables you actually care about. Nasturtiums are the classic Amish trap crop. Aphids are wildly attracted to nasturtiums, far more than they are to your beans or peppers. Plant nasturtiums in a ring around the outside of your garden or at the ends of your rows about 6 to 8 inches apart. The aphids will cluster on the nasturtiums and largely leave your main crops alone. Once the nasturtiums are loaded with aphids, you have two choices. You can pull the plants and dispose of them, or better yet, leave them and let the ladybugs and lacewings from your insectary strip come feast. That's the system working together. For flea beetles, which are a nightmare on eggplant and young brassicas, plant a row of radishes as a trap crop about 2 feet in front of your main planting. Flea beetles prefer radish leaves and they'll congregate there first. Sacrifice the radish tops and your eggplant stay clean. Blue Hubbard squash is another traditional trap crop that the Amish and many New England gardeners have used for generations. If you grow any kind of squash or pumpkin, planting a couple of Blue Hubbard squash plants at the far corners of your garden will draw squash, vine borers, and cucumber beetles away from your main crop. They're magnets for those pests. You're not trying to save the Blue Hubbard, you're using it as a decoy. The beauty of trap cropping is that it requires no sprays, no products, and no daily labor. You plant it once and it works all season. The pests do exactly what nature designed them to do. They just do it somewhere you don't mind. This last step is the only one that involves making something, and even then it takes about 10 minutes. For the times when pest pressure is heavier than usual, or when you have a specific problem that needs direct attention, the Amish rely on homemade deterrent sprays made from ingredients they already have in the kitchen. Here's the recipe I learned from an Amish neighbor in Lancaster County, and it's the one I keep coming back to because it works and it's dead simple. Take 4 to 5 cloves of garlic, 2 hot peppers, cayenne works great, or whatever hot pepper you have on hand, and chop them up. Add them to 1 QT of warm water and let the mixture steep overnight at least 12 hours. The next morning, strain it through cheesecloth into a spray bottle and add 1 TSP of liquid dish soap. Not detergent, just plain dish soap. The soap helps the spray stick to the leaves and also breaks down the waxy coating on soft-bodied insects like aphids. Spray this directly on affected plants, focusing on the undersides of leaves where most pests hide. Apply in the early morning or late evening, never in direct midday sun because the soap can cause minor leaf burn in intense heat. One application usually keeps pests at bay for 5 to 7 days. Reapply after heavy rain. Now, I want to be straight with you. This spray does not kill pests on contact the way a synthetic pesticide does. It deters them. It makes your plants smell and taste unpleasant to the insects, so they move on. Combined with all the other steps we've covered, that's usually more than enough. But if you're expecting one spray to wipe out an entire infestation overnight, that's not what this is. This is part of a system, not a standalone solution. Let me share some patterns I've noticed over the years. Things I used to do the conventional way that the Amish approach handles differently. No judgment here. I did all of these myself for longer than I'd like to admit. The first pattern is reaching for a spray at the first sign of a bug. Most of us were taught that any pest presence means you have a problem. The Amish see a few aphids and they don't panic. They know the ladybugs are coming. A small pest population is actually food for your beneficial insects. And if you spray it away, you remove the food source that keeps your predators around. The Amish let the system respond before they intervene. The second pattern is planting in monoculture rows. I did this for years because it looked organized and made harvesting easy. But a long row of nothing but cabbages is an open invitation for cabbage moths. Interplanting breaks up that signal and makes it harder for pests to find their target. The third pattern is keeping the garden too clean. Bare soil between rows might look tidy, but it eliminates habitat for ground beetles, spiders, and other soil-dwelling predators. A little clover between rows or a thin layer of straw mulch gives those allies somewhere to live and hunt. The fourth pattern is ignoring the soil. I used to think pest control and soil health were two separate topics. The Amish taught me they're the same topic. Weak soil grows weak plants, and weak plants attract pests. Strong soil grows strong plants, and strong plants can handle a few nibbles without collapsing. Now here's something I picked up from an Amish family that I haven't seen mentioned in any gardening guide. And it's one of those techniques that seems almost too simple to matter until you try it. When transplanting young seedlings into the garden, they place a column made from a cardboard tube around the base of each plant, pushed about 1 inch into the soil, and rising about 2 inches above it. They use old toilet paper rolls or cut paper towel rolls into sections. That's it. This cardboard collar does two things. First, it creates a physical barrier against cutworms, which are the larvae that crawl along the soil surface at night and chew right through the stems of young transplants. Cutworms are responsible for more dead seedlings than most gardeners realize, and once they sever that stem, the plant is gone. The collar stops them cold. Second, the cardboard breaks down naturally over 4 to 6 weeks, right around the time the plant stem is hardened enough that cutworms can no longer bite through it. No plastic, no waste, no chemicals, just a piece of cardboard, and the understanding that protecting a young plant through its most vulnerable window is all you really need to do. I started using these collars 3 seasons ago, and I went from losing 5 to 8 transplants every spring to losing almost none. It's a kind of quiet, practical wisdom that doesn't make headlines, but saves your garden one seedling at a time. That's what I've learned from Amish gardeners about keeping pests out of the garden without reaching for a single chemical. Build your soil every year. Plant companions that confuse pests and attract allies. Create habitat for the beneficial insects that do the hard work for you. Walk your garden every morning and catch problems while they're small. Use trap crops to redirect pests away from what you care about. And when you need a little extra help, mix up a simple kitchen spray that deters without destroying. If this story changed how you look at the balance of nature in your backyard, please subscribe and like the video. We are uncovering the traditional wisdom that modern methods have tried to bury. Let's grow a better future together. The next treasure of gardening history will be open soon.